Okay, we'll get started. So firstly, welcome and thank you for joining us at this webinar, which will talk about everything that you need to know to set up in the UAE. We are recording this, so if you want a copy of the recording, please let us know and we'll happily send you through the link. And the way we're going to work this is I have my colleague Harry here, and it's going to be a conversation over the next sort of 20-25 minutes, and then we'll pick those up at the end of the presentation for you. Let's just get started with some quick introductions. So my name's Gary Hales. I'm Head of Business Development here at Nimbus Consultancy. I've been in the UAE for 10 years now, most of that working in fiduciary businesses and corporate solutions providers. So I've got a lot of experience within this particular market. I have my colleague Harry Crusher here with me.
Hello, my name's Harry Crusher. I've been in Dubai just 3 years, but all I have done since moving to Dubai is corporate service solutions, specifically in the UAE.
That's great. Thanks very much, Harry. And as I mentioned, we're both with Nimbus Consultancy. So for those of you who don't know us, we're a boutique corporate advisory firm with a focus on UAE and KSA, Saudi Arabia as well. We've been in existence for over 6 years now, and we've got almost 40 employees within the region. And during that 6 years, we've completed over 400 company setups in both the USA, UAE and Saudi Arabia. As a go-to-market entry partner, we've helped companies from more than 30 countries around the world and from over 25 industries. So for example, media companies, energy, consulting, fintech, etc. And we've helped those sort of companies expand and set up in the UAE. Some of you may have been at our last webinar last month, which we're holding on a monthly basis now. So this is the second in a series that we're running. Last month was on Saudi Arabia. This month is on UAE. And each of these webinars will be based on the feedback we get from our clients and people who are looking to relocate to this part of the world, so we can give you the information to help you make that step up. So what we're going to cover in the next sort of 20 minutes or so: why you should choose the UAE for your business. Within the UAE, which location should you choose? What is the process that you need to go through when setting up your company? What business operations do you need to be prepared for and what requirements are needed? We'll touch on residency and visas as well for you. Business operations and taxation, always a much sought after topic. We'll talk about timeline as well for you, key takeaways and final advice as well. And like I said, at the end, we'll have a Q&A session for you. So we'll move on now, and Harry, we'll kick off with some questions. So first one for you: why should someone choose the UAE to set up their company?
So for me personally, to choose the UAE, obviously tax advantages when it comes to business and personal income tax. Dubai, or the UAE as a whole, is the global hub for the MENA region, giving you access to the entire market on this side of the world. And also for me, Dubai's vision going forwards is, in my opinion, forever growth. They don't seem to be slowing down in terms of growth. So for me, the vision is the most important thing. Businesses are continuing to move over here to tap into this region.
Okay, thanks, Harry. I mean, just to add to that as well, I was reading recently that they're expecting the UAE population to double in the next 15 years. So there's a massive focus in Dubai in particular to grow the market here, attract people to this part of the world. And we are seeing obviously lots of people inquiring and working out how they want to come to the UAE, how they can set up here. A lot of it is driven from their home country, obviously in the UK tax situations, national insurance, etc., in terms of the increased burden on companies. So stepping out to the UAE is quite a popular choice for many people. So we're seeing that as an increase. And in the 10 years I've been here, the interest in relocating has just grown significantly. So Harry, just sort of taking that further then, when you come out into the UAE and set up a company here, there's over 60 free zones, and how would you go about choosing where you're going to locate your company? Do you go for a free zone? And if so, which one? Mainland is an option. So, let's give people a bit of insight in terms of how they go about locating and choosing where to be with their company.
So ultimately for me, when a client comes to me, it's always how they actually operate their company, or if, depending on whether they already have a company or who they want their target market to be. Realistically, the only suggestion I would have when it comes to mainland is if you have governmental contracts, or if you're wanting an actual physical space. The free zone has opened so many doors for so many companies. You can invoice from Dubai, you don't necessarily have to be here. most of the process is done completely remotely, so it makes everything 15 to 20 times easier, I'd say. In terms of processes, the mainland, you have to be physically present for at least half of it. The free zone licenses, you can be outside of the country for at least 80 to 85% of it. So it's created a door opening for people to be able to do this completely remotely.
And when you talk remotely then, Harry, in terms of setting up here, do people need to have a physical office? Are offices readily available? How do they decide how they're going to operate remotely, semi-virtual, virtual? How does that work for them?
Ultimately, it's dependent on the client, depending on how they want to operate. All of the free zones, a free zone license comes with something that we call a lease agreement here, which is a business address. You can use it as a hot desk for X amount of hours per month. But you can also, depending on the free zone, sometimes obtain office space as well. Some of them do have physical office spaces or even allow you to work outside of the free zone. In the mainland, it is mandatory. There is a virtual office option available. It just, it costs a little bit more to get that virtual office if you're not at the stage of being able to purchase a physical office or even rent a physical office.
And are you restricted? So if you set up in a free zone, do you have to have your office in that free zone, or can you have your office wherever you want?
Again, it's dependent on the free zone. Some free zones will give you a non-objection certificate where you can then get an office space wherever you wish across the UAE. Other free zones are very specific to where they would like you to work if you choose that specific jurisdiction, let's say.
Great, thanks, Harry. So that's got some of the sort of key questions that have come throughout quickly. Let's just sort of take a step back and give people a sort of more high-level view of how this whole process works. Can you just talk that through from when somebody's sitting in their home country, thinking about where they're going to go, to the end piece when they're set up and their business is running? Let's get a bit of an insight into how that process works.
Okay, so I'll start with the free zone license. So there are 6 or 7 steps to a free zone license. I'll use, the person being sat in their home country as an example. So realistically, the process is always the business license first. Choosing your activity, etc., is what we do. So the start is always the business license. This normally takes 3 to 5 working days on a generic timeline. We then apply for something that we call the immigration card. So the immigration card is it's the incorporation card of your company, and ultimately it's what allows you to have a visa on your own business license. So you will be sponsored by the company that you own. From here, we then apply for your residency. We can do this whether you're inside or outside of the country. Again, dependent. We do it whilst you're outside the country, we can apply for an entry permit. This means that when you arrive to Dubai, you are essentially arriving as a resident of the country. From here, you do a medical test. So the medical test involves basically they take a small portion of blood and they do an x-ray of your chest. This is to make sure you have no underlying health issues. And after this, from here, we take you for your biometrics test. Now, the biometrics tests are fingerprint records for police here in the UAE. As soon as both of these processes have been completed, we then receive your physical Emirates ID card. This is then what allows you to open personal bank accounts, open business bank accounts. Your Emirates ID is essentially your key to the UAE. And generally speaking, a free zone business license can be processed a little bit quicker than a mainland license. I'll touch on the mainland in a second. Free zone, done. Mainland, there are a lot more steps to a mainland business license. So there are initial approvals, and then we have to reserve the trade name. As soon as these 2 steps are completed, we then go for the payment voucher. So the payment voucher changes every single time. This is completely dependent on how many shareholders there are, the activity, whether there is a potential external approval needed, and whether you decide to take a physical office or if you take a virtual office. Now, if you were to take a physical office, what we have to do is there is a 5% market fees of the annual rent of that space. So as a silly example, if the office lease was 100,000 dirhams per year, 5,000 dirhams of that would have to be added onto the payment voucher cost. So as soon as we have this, and if we have to do any, external approvals, from here we then again apply for the immigration card, and this is where it comes close to the free zone process. So as soon as the immigration card is released, we then have to. This is where I need you to be physically present. you have to physically sign the Memorandum of Association and the notary. There is an option to do it remotely. There is just a small cost incurred within this process. So as soon as the Memorandum of Association and the notary is signed, this is when we can then apply for your entry permit and make sure that we complete the visa process. The visa process is no different to the free zone process. So it's again the same, the medical test, the biometrics, and then your Emirates ID card arrives. And then, again, dependent on whether you take that physical space or whether we get you a virtual office is, again, dependent on your situation and how you're looking to operate your company.
And you just touched on there, Harry, about having to physically be here in the UAE. I mean, how long does somebody have to be here for? And is that at the beginning of the process, the end of the process? How does that work?
So when it comes to the free zone process, I need you for the last 20% of the process. So, dependent on how quickly some guys would want it. Sometimes I have people here for 5 working days, other time I need them here for 2 to 3 working weeks. It completely depends on the process with the free zone and what license they're going for. When it comes to the mainland license, if they don't want to sign the Memorandum of Association and the notary electronically, this is where I would need you here probably for 3 working weeks to complete at least the signature and at least start the visa process. Obviously, once the visa process has started, you won't be able to leave the country until you have your physical Emirates ID. So that's something to certainly take into consideration.
Let's just expand on the visa situation a little bit more there, Harry. I mean, again, how does that work? You've obviously, as an individual, got to wait a certain period of time, as you said, to the last sort of 20%. Do both shareholders need to be there to go and sign all the documents and get all the medicals done? Do all the employees have, if they're people are bringing employees from their home country to Dubai, do they need to be there? How does that all work? How does anybody manage it? And again, dependents, partners and children, do they all have to go out and fly and get it all done early as well?
So not necessarily, no. The mainland, in terms of if there is more than one shareholder, only one visa can actually be processed at a time. So it would be a case of whoever has more shares, or even if it's 50-50, you would have some sort of contractual agreement that you can be the signatory of the company, so that you would be able to sign the notary and the Memorandum of Association. And then when it comes to visas, you can come at the same time, but you'll be here for a longer period of time because we can only process one visa at a time in the mainland. The free zone is different. It's a lot more flexible. Some free zones allow up to 50 shareholders. So, in terms of processing visas, this can be done simultaneously. People with families, so it's completely up to you in sort of which direction you'd want to go. I'll use a married couple as an example. Let's say you were 50-50 on the business. You can both get investor visas, which is what is generically given with a free zone or a mainland license. One of you can be named as manager, which is an employee, but still have shares in the company. Completely depends on sort of how you'd like to structure it. And then from there, you can sponsor your children dependent on, who would be sponsoring them. In terms of designations, there are hundreds and hundreds of designations. In the mainland, there are 3 different categories. There's Cat C, Cat D and Cat B, which all are dependent on the qualifications you have in education. The more higher up you are, the more this visa costs as a designation. An investor visa is cheaper. All family members can be sponsored, even if you chose to sponsor parent, family in general can be sponsored.
And on the golden visa, Harry, there's a lot of talk about golden visas. They become very popular. And again, clients I've spoken to sort of question around a golden visa versus, a visa through their company. Why would anybody choose a golden visa? Is that a good option to choose?
I mean, absolutely, yeah. I mean, look, so to qualify for a golden visa, there are 3 current routes. There is special talent, and you can be nominated for this. There is the property route, which is you have to invest 2 million dirhams into property here in the UAE to qualify for a golden visa. Or you can be a salary route, which is what, generally speaking, 90% of sort of clients go for. To qualify for this, you have to be an employee of the business. Again, some free zones allow you to be 100% shareholder and also the employee of the business. And then how we do it is, generate a salary certificate. You pay yourself a minimum of 30,000 dirhams per month. And after 6 months of showing that salary, showing it as a legitimate salary, from there you then qualify for the golden visa. In terms of the advantage for it, with a generic 2-year visa, which is what comes with all businesses, you have to, let's say you were working remotely and you weren't necessarily working in Dubai or the UAE in general, you have to visit the UAE once every 180 days. This is to keep your visa active, to keep your bank accounts active, and to keep your business license active. The golden visa completely eradicates this. You can come and go as you please. You don't have to be in the country. You wouldn't have to come back for 3 years, let's say, and everything would consistently turn over, if you like.
Great, thanks for that, Harry. A lot of questions I get again when I'm traveling around to the UK and various places is, if people are looking at setting up here, but they're a consultant, for example, and their clients are spread internationally, not necessarily in the UAE. How does that work? Is it different? Should they go free zone? Should they go mainland? I know it varies, everybody's different, but for those people who've got international clients, can they operate remotely with a virtual office and see clients and be based here?
Absolutely, of course, yeah. I mean, look, generally speaking, 90% of inquiries that come our way are free zone inquiries. Everything, generally speaking, can be done within the free zone. You can work from anywhere from the free zone, and that's why they were created the way that they are. I think, especially consulting, ultimately it would depend on who your clients were, whether they were individuals or whether they were companies that you were consulting. If they're individuals, then of course you'd have to be in the mainland because the free zones work on the business to business basis. So yeah, I mean, look, for me, it all depends on who your consumer is.
Okay, thanks, Harry. You couldn't have a discussion about the UAE without mentioning tax. So let's sort of explore that one a little bit. I mean, what sort of tax is liable for, are people liable for, I guess, both individually and obviously for their company? We're aware there's tax for company, not necessarily for the personal basis, but just sort of expand on that and just, help people to understand where they are potentially liable for tax.
Of course. So on an individual basis, if you choose to relocate here, then you pay 0% personal tax, income tax. From a corporate level, you pay 9% on the profits above 375,000 dirhams per year, and this is net profit. So all company deductions will be removed from this figure, and ultimately 90% of people keep it at that threshold to maximise the amount of money that go in their pockets.
Okay. That's great. Thanks, Harry. I mean, it all sounds a bit complicated with different free zones and mainland and all sorts of different requirements, etc. I mean, how long does it take to get all this completed, and how much can I do myself? How much does a company like Nimbus get involved to help get all this done? Just sort of put my mind at rest and people's mind at rest who are listening in here and thinking, oh, well, this is too difficult to do.
So for a free zone license, generally speaking, I always sort of ask for 4 working weeks from absolute A to Z. When it comes to the mainland, it would ultimately depend on, again, your situation, whether you wanted that physical space or whether you wanted the virtual space. If a virtual space, again, I can do it in 4 working weeks. If it's a physical space, I would probably suggest 6 working weeks. For me, it's all about taking the headache away, and making sure that everything, sort of goes as smoothly as possibly can. We're obviously doing what we do. We have great connections within the authorities and, make it as easy as possible for our clients. We would never, I don't know how to say it, we would never suggest something that we know wouldn't necessarily work for you. It's always about giving honest and the right advice, especially in this industry.
Right, great. Yes, there's a lot of people out there offering all sorts of services. Right, great. All right. Thanks, Harry. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to break away to some of the questions that have come through. Somebody's really on the ball here with this one. They're mentioning that some laws were changed at the beginning of the week regarding free zone companies being allowed to operate in the mainland. Can you just expand on that? What does it mean? What is the impact?
Of course. So basically, again, free zone companies aren't necessarily supposed to work or weren't supposed to work within the mainland. So basically, the free zones have been opened up to allow to operate within the mainland along with the mainland companies. Obviously, it depends on the activities. Some free zones won't require an external approval, whereas the mainland will. So if you then were to choose to work within the mainland, you then still have to take that approval to be allowed to operate within the mainland. But yeah, it's a huge sort of development for free zones. I think there's going to be a lot of authorities fighting it out to get those approvals.
And so do you think that'll make life easier for somebody who's looking to relocate and set up their company here?
Yeah, hugely.
Great. Another question. somebody with an IT services company, where would they be placed if they wanted to take advantage of the tax situation? Let me rephrase that. Where would I be placed if I wanted full tax advantages?
So there's so many designated free zones that you have small tax reliefs, etc. Again, ultimately, I would sort of ask the question of how much you expecting to turn over on a year-to-year basis. But I would again ask where your consumers are. Are they individuals? Are you an IT services company that helps other companies? Do you work remotely or do you need a physical space? Generally speaking, I would say 70% of the businesses that are IT services are set up in free zones so that they can just, work as and where they would like. Especially a business like that, generally speaking, it is done remotely. So yeah, for me, I would place them in a free zone, specifically in Dubai, of course. And then they don't have to necessarily be here.
Great, thanks, Harry. Just going back to visas and licenses and activities and all that you talked about earlier. And how long are they valid for? Is it 1 year, 5 years? How often do all these things need to be renewed? And the same fee every single year, or is it cheaper the longer your visa is valid for or your license is valid for?
So in the mainland, a 1 year license is possible only. The visas that come with businesses are always a 2 year validity. In the free zones, they are, again, a lot more flexible. Some free zones allow up to a 10-year business license, which a lot more upfront cost, but it does actually save you money in the long run when it comes to renewing the license if you chose to do it on a year-to-year basis. So obviously, when it comes to businesses, if you were to take a 1 year license with a 2 year visa, obviously the second year is going to be cheaper because then the first year renewal is going to be cheaper because the second year you're then renewing your visa again if you don't sort of decide to go down the potential golden visa route. But yeah, I mean, free zones are great because you can take those multi-year licenses. A lot of my clients tend to take a two year license in a free zone so that they are always renewing the license with the visa. It makes, it takes the headache away of having to renew the license every 12 months,
Right, thank you. And the final question that's come through here. So when looking at the structure of a business to be set up in Dubai or the UAE, should they be looking at an LLC, a sole establishment, or a branch office? How is that decision made? How does, say, Nimbus, for example, help somebody make the right decision in the right structure?
Again, it completely depends on the requirements. I would say that 90% of our clients are sole establishments, entrepreneurs coming over here to sort of start their Dubai journey. Because when it comes to, the corporate structures, it's a lot longer of a process, the attestation of documents that's required from the embassies in the home country for the documents to then come to Dubai and be attested by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So for me, again, it completely depends on a case-to-case basis, but 90% are sole establishments or LLCs. Branches are a little less popular because if they're linked to the home country, depending on where the income is coming from, you still may be, liable for tax. So
that's great. Excellent. Thanks for that then, Harry. So that brings us spot on to the half hour that we've been talking together. So everybody who's joined in and listened and been part of this, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, there'll be people who are listening to the recording as well. So thank you for that. If you have any questions, please reach out to myself or Harry. You'll see on the screen that, we can help with UK, UAE and KSA company formations, can help with accounting and reporting, corporate secretarial solutions and banking solutions, as well as HR advisory, payroll and tax services, and immigration and visa services as well. So we've got a broad range of services to help you, and we've got a team here, as I mentioned earlier, of almost 40 people already and waiting to help many companies around the world relocate. So thank you once again for taking your time.
Thank you.